We just got a massive new update on the Subnautica 2 situation, and let me tell you, this one is actually insane. So why don't you go ahead and grab some popcorn and strap in, because oh boy. Now if you just got here and you're feeling very confused right now, well, you can just go ahead and check out my previous videos on the topic to get the full picture, but just to give you guys the basic rundown. Back in 2021, Krafton, the mega publisher behind PUBG, bought the studio behind Subnautica, Unknown Worlds, for $500 million. But the deal included a massive $250 million bonus on the line if Subnautica 2 hit its revenue targets by the end of 2025. Fast forward to the summer of last year when Subnautica 2 was gearing up for its big early access launch in August, and the hype train is officially leaving the station. But out of nowhere, Krafton hits the emergency stop button. Krafton proceeded to delay the game into our current year of 2026. They took total control of the studio and fired the three main guys who built the franchise: CEO Ted Gill and founders Charlie Cleveland and Max McGuire. Now, Krafton's public excuse was that the founders had completely checked out. They claimed Charlie was busy trying to make movies instead of games, and that Subnautica 2 was basically a disaster that wasn't ready to launch. Later on, they even accused the CEO of corporate espionage, claiming he downloaded hundreds of thousands of files to his personal hard drive right before he got the boot. Then, Charlie, Ted, and Max fired back with a massive lawsuit called Fortis Advisors versus Krafton. And when this originally started last year, people were hotly debating on who to believe. Were the original devs actually just lazy and trying to steal their own game, or was the publisher just being incredibly shady? Well, the Delaware Court of Chancery has officially decided on a verdict for Phase 1. Because like I mentioned yesterday, we got the full verdict from the judge herself. In this document that I will be reading for you, we will see the judge's own words and her take on this entire situation. Take, that sounds kind of silly to say, but her judgment. Now, this document is over 90 pages long, so I will not be reading all of these pages for you, but I will look into the most important new developments after everything that we learned last year. Unknown Worlds Entertainment is a video game studio best known for Subnautica, an underwater survival adventure. Eager to capture its creative magic, South Korean gaming conglomerate Krafton Inc. acquired Unknown Worlds in 2021 for $500 million upfront, up to $250 million in contingent earn-out payments. To secure the deal, Krafton contractually guaranteed that Unknown Worlds founders, Charlie Cleveland and Max McGuire, along with CEO Ted Gill, would retain operational control and could only be fired for cause. Now this takes us to the Equity Purchase Agreement, or EPA for short. On October 29, 2021, Krafton and Unknown Worlds entered into an equity purchase agreement where Krafton purchased 100% of Unknown Worlds' outstanding equity for $500 million upfront payment. Cleveland, McGuire, and Gill, defined in the EPA as the key employees and other Unknown Worlds team members, also became eligible for the $250 million earnout payment. Eligibility for the performance-based earnout is determined by Unknown Worlds revenue through December 31, 2025, with an option to extend the earnout period through June 2026. The earnout formula is highly leveraged. If Unknown Worlds surpasses a revenue threshold of $0.8 million, Krafton must pay $3.12 for each additional dollar of revenue generated up to the $250 million cap. So it wasn't specifically just a $250 million payout like that, it was up to a $250 million bonus with $3.12 per dollar of revenue earned through Subnautica 2. To give them runway to achieve these targets, the key employees secured a measure of autonomy. The EPA grants them operational control of Unknown Worlds in all material respects. And this takes us to the terminations. On July 1, 2025, Krafton sent termination letters to Cleveland, McGuire, and Gill, removing them from their positions effective July 31. The letters identified a single ground for dismissal: the intention to proceed with the premature release of Subnautica 2. Krafton asserted that releasing the game in August would inflict long-term damage on the reputation of the game and franchise. The same day, Krafton removed the key employees from Unknown World's board and replaced them with 3 Krafton representatives in addition to Park. The new board resolved that Subnautica 2 shall not be released for early access absent further review and the affirmative vote of a majority of the board. To replace Gil as CEO, Krafton appointed Steve Papoutsis. Papoutsis was already the CEO of another Krafton subsidiary and would run Unknown Worlds part-time. Before his appointment, he had neither played an Unknown Worlds game nor overseen the development of an early access title, which, this didn't really go over that well with most people. The key employees were not surprised by their terminations. After watching Krafton starve the studio of its publishing resources and lock them out of the Steam publishing platform, they expected that Krafton would take this drastic step. In anticipation of further escalation, they initiated large-scale data downloads of Unknown Worlds company files and data. Now, we need to talk about the Milestone review. In May 2025, the party scheduled a Milestone review meeting, and for Unknown Worlds, this was an opportunity to coordinate with Krafton on marketing and publishing logistics for the upcoming launch. Krafton's finance team ran earnout projections to prepare for the meeting. Their models prepared that a successful August 2025 early access launch of Subnautica 2 with over 1.67, I didn't mean to say that, it says 67. million copies sold by Q4 2025 would generate significant revenue and trigger the earnout. A financial planning base case scenario indicated a 191.8 million total earnout payment, and a best case scenario indicating a $242.2 million payment. Now, these figures immediately captured the attention of CEO Kim. Kim, who had personally led the acquisition of Unknown Worlds, felt that Krafton had overpaid. Really? My guy. He feared that making an earnout payment would earn him a reputation as a pushover. Now, this is one of those things that I have such an irritating problem with, because this guy thinks that paying out money that he promised would make him sort of a pushover, or would make him earn less respect, or would make him lose respect among his peers. It's so goddamn delusional. Come on, dude. If he had actually proceeded and Krafton had proceeded with paying out what they had promised, none of this would have happened. Krafton wouldn't be in the shitter. They would have earned so much respect from their peers because they would have kept their word, and they would be known as a very generous company that you want to work for. What is this? What? How did... It just makes me so irritated. How can he imagine that he would be a pushover if he actually decided on keeping his promise? What? Anyway, it gets much worse, because this new revelation had my head spinning because I couldn't believe it. At a May 20, 2025 meeting, Kim told Cleveland that paying the earnout could significantly reduce the studio's book value. Kim said that this reduction was something he, as the person who was in charge of the investment, would have to be accountable for. When Kim asked if there was a need to rush the release, Cleveland held firm that delaying the project increases risk, and that it's better to launch early, get user feedback, and improve from there, like they usually do it. At any rate, they were going to have a Milestone meeting about the game. And here it says, a week later, the planned Milestone review meeting went forward. Gallegos showed Krafton executives the latest game build, which showed great progress. That being Anthony Gallegos they're talking about here. Gil and Cleveland advocated for support for the planned August 14 release, but some Krafton executives claimed that the game was not ready for release, citing a lack of freshness and volume. Krafton's Oliveira told a colleague he was starting to think that people are trying to create excuses to not pay the earnouts. By the end of May, Kim had looped in Park, that being Maria Park, who was essentially a contact between Krafton and Unknown Worlds, the founders, and she was more like a neutral person in this entire thing. And they also included Krafton's legal department to discuss the earnout. Kim was focused on the amounts that each of Cleveland, Maguire, and Gil stood to make, which he viewed as greed. Oh boy. He complained that the EPA was a bad deal and he felt taken advantage of. Park cautioned him, Maria Park that is, though she didn't think the current Subnautica 2 build was in such a bad state, which could create a debatable issue in potential litigation. She essentially warned him that this was gonna happen, which is happening right now. She also noted that apart from Cleveland personally, who had apparently become negligent since Moonbreaker, she would say that Unknown Worlds hasn't been so poorly managed as to deliberately deceive the parent company. She was essentially defending the three founders, that hey, it's not that bad, chill. But Kim remained focused on the cost Krafton has to pay with the enterprise value it was actually gaining. Krafton's analysis showed an enterprise value of approximately $93.5 million compared to the projected $191.8 million earnout. Kim began to explore options, including firing the key employees. On June 2nd, Maria Park warned Kim over Slack that a dismissal without cause would not eliminate the earnout obligation while exposing Krafton to lawsuit and reputation risk. And so, Kim turned to ChatGPT for help. Oh! When the AI chatbot responded that the earnout would be difficult to cancel, ChatGPT told him that it was gonna be difficult to cancel. Kim complained to Park that the EPA was a contract under which we can only be dragged around. He expressed frustration that Unknown Worlds had the authority to determine the release date and determine publishing without Krafton's involvement. Kim asked Park to reach out to the legal department and to call him. Moments later, Park sent Kim the section of the EPA discussing the key employee's operational control over Unknown Worlds for as long as any key employee is employed by the company. So again, she tried to remind him that, hey, this is signed into the contract we wrote. It's their baby. We let them have it. They are in control. But he really wanted to change that. At ChatGPT's suggestion, Kim formed an internal task force dubbed Project X. Oh God, this can't be more cheesy if I actually tried. Come on, Project X? The task force's mandate was to either negotiate a deal on the earnout or execute a takeover of Unknown Worlds. They looked to buy time. Again, this is the judge's own words. This is what is already decided. This is the story, guys. There is no, two ways about this anymore. This is the story. This is what happened. On June 4, Richard Yoon, Krafton's head of strategy and operations, circulated a plan outlining the next steps after having a discussion with Kim. He directed that Krafton's messaging, including Gil, be that Krafton was in the process of internal alignment. He also shared a draft announcement that Krafton would make to Unknown Worlds fans, suggesting that Subnautica 2 would be delayed and that Cleveland and Maguire had been uninvolved with the game. By June 5, Krafton continued to put Gil off. Gil grew concerned, writing to Kim that he would appreciate Kim's recommendation as soon as possible. Gil explained that Krafton had become non-responsive with launch planning, leaving Unknown Worlds with zero progress on many key initiatives. He received no response. Meanwhile, Kim sought ChatGPT's counsel on how to proceed if Krafton failed to reach a deal with Unknown Worlds on the earnout. The AI chatbot prepared a response strategy to a no-deal scenario which Kim shared with Yoon. The strategy included a pressure and leverage package and an implementation roadmap by scenario. It also suggested a key summary of responses Krafton could deliver to the key employees. And so ChatGPT came up with this 3-step plan, I guess. Preemptive framing. Repeat that protecting quality and fan trust is the highest priority. Undermine the large corporation versus indie framing. They were literally planning to undermine fan support for the original founders. Holy shit. Securing control points, lock down Steam and console publishing rights and access rights over code and build pipeline through both legal and technical aspects. For the earnout freeze, keep room for negotiations through provision stating immediate removal if specific developments results are achieved, and systemic materials for legal defense, prepare contract interpretation memorandums, log all communication, seek external consultation, team retention, operation of retention packages for key personnel and rapid backfill pipelines in anticipation of resignation and departure scenarios, and two-handed strategy. Create a structure that allows for both hardball, legal plus finance, and softball support and incentives approaches so moderate factions within Unknown Worlds can push for compromise. Over the next month, Krafton followed most of ChatGPT's recommendations. Now, the judge also goes over the data downloads that the founders did before leaving, and she essentially explains that it was fully in a defensive response because they were anticipating that they were going to get fired by Krafton. And that is also why Krafton was so very heavy-handed on this idea that they weren't allowed to make any hard copies or make any copies of any of the files and stuff like that, because they wanted to go and rummage around and find as much information as they can and essentially destroy the founder's credibility. And that is what she says here. When an employer faces a contractual payout it wishes to avoid, it is heavily incentivized to go rummaging through the employee's history to find any reason it can to announce that the termination was really for cause. That is precisely what happened here. Frustrated by the key employee's refusal to forfeit operational control and facing a 9-figure liability, Krafton went searching for a pretext. This court of equity will not permit a party to use the after-acquired evidence doctrine to fabricate cause where the evidence shows the termination decision was made for different reasons. The doctrine prevents a wrongdoer from profiting from concealed misconduct. It does not grant an employer license to retroactively invent grounds for termination. She's essentially saying Krafton is making shit up. And now this brings us to the actual good news, because here is essentially her full ruling. To remedy these breaches, Gil is reinstated as CEO of Unknown Worlds with full operational authority over the studio. Because restoring him vindicates the seller's operational rights, I decline to return Cleveland and McGuire to the peripheral roles they occupied before their terminations. Gil, with his authority restored, may proceed with the early access release of Subnautica 2 when he deems it appropriate. To ensure the specific performance remedy is not illusory, the base earnout period is equitably extended by the duration of Gil's ouster. She stated furthermore that the original earnout window, defined in the EPA as the testing period, was set to expire on December 31, 2025, subject to Fortis's unilateral option to extend it to June 30, 2026. Because Krafton's breach wrongfully deprived the key employees of operational control during this window, Fortis's request to extend the earnout period is granted. To afford the sellers a genuine opportunity to achieve the earnout under Gil's restored leadership, the testing period is extended by the duration of Gil's ouster. The base December 31, 2025 earnout deadline is therefore extended by 258 days, equal to the period between Gil's termination and this option, which establishes a new deadline of September 15, 2026. So at the end of the day, we have a full victory for the founders, at least for phase 1 of this entire litigation process. But as the judge has said, there are several other things to go over for phase 2, and we will see how that turns out later on. But for now, it looks like, well, Krafton was really the bad guy from the start, which I think is to no one's surprise, really. But it's really cool to see that at least one of the original founders has been reinstated. Gil, that is, has been reinstated as the CEO. I was just reminded over Krafton's response to this decision, and they were essentially like, now we disagree. But, you know, the law is the law. So now, you know, Gil is going to be reinstated, and we'll see where we go from here. But since the window has been extended for their bonus to September, it's possible we are going to get Subnautica 2 in early access state, that is, before too long. So we probably won't have to wait as long to get Subnautica 2. Very much looking forward to trying out the game finally, and it's good to see that this is happening. But again, this is not completely finished. I will be making a full video that goes into all of this, you know, that has been going on, the entire history of the situation, and I will do so whenever we get phase 2 and the final ruling of everything. So yeah, subscribe for that if you haven't already. At any rate, thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Mr. Olten signing off.